smile, we're on camera. So we are recording. I got to figure out how to do this right because the last 2 times I've had to re-record the entire lesson to get it posted. But anyway, so we're going to kind of be talking about John Lennon today in a weird way. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Now, we're not going to be like diving into the idealistic thoughts of him, but we are going to be talking about heaven and hell and that sort of thing. So we'll kind of get into that. So I always start off by asking a very simple question. Everyone point to where heaven is. Point to heaven. Okay, there we go. Oh, there we go. There's a different one. So, okay, there we go. We got a different one. And then where's hell?
Everywhere.
Okay, everywhere. I-4. So when I ask 18-year-old kids this, they go, heaven's there and hell's there. And then I said, okay. I said, but if you're living in Australia and I ask the same question, then are they pointing here for heaven or pointing here for heaven? I mean, what's that mean?
I tried to explain to her the people down here are standing on their feet upside down.
But how do you not know we put ourselves on top? Maybe we're the ones standing on our feet upside down, you know? Yeah. So anyways, I try to explain to the students that we have actually studied the earth literally to its core, and so far we have not found hell. So we have not uncovered a place of eternal demonic torment, but we have uncovered all the layers of the earth. When we're pointing out into the heavens, again, pointing up, pointing down, these people pointing over this way, it's not just up or down, it's, all the different directions. So what location, how do we put heaven in a GPS? Where's it at? So when we're saying heaven and hell, what do we mean and where do we mean? Because we talk about it in a Christian context in such concrete forms, that it's here, it's there, and we're going to go there and try to avoid going there, and things like that. So today, we are going to talk about the evolution of the concept of Satan and hell. So that's the topic today, the evolution of the concept of Satan and hell. We're going to start, I usually don't do a lot of reading because I'm a poor reader, but I'm going to read this entire thing all the way through because we're going to come back to it. If you've heard of the story of the fallen angel, Lucifer falls from the heavens and wanted to take over, got cast out of heaven, got cast down to hell, and that's how we get the whole Lucifer thing. So we're going to read, this is the verse where it comes from. We're going to read it, pigeonhole it, do the rest of the lecture, then come back to it, okay? The Lord has broken off the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers, that struck down the peoples in their wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses exalt over you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no one comes to cut us down. Hell beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it rises from their throne. All who were kings of the nations, all of them will speak and say to you, you too have become as weak as us. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to hell. The sound of your harps, maggots are the bed beneath you. The worms are your covering. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who are laid the nations low. You said in your hearts, I will ascend to heaven. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly, on the heights of Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Okay. That is the story of the fallen angel, but we will come back to it. Lucifer thinking he was going to take over God, be all high and mighty. God says, I'll take care of that. I'll cast you out, and then you'll get sent down to hell. That's it. So, again, we'll come back to that. So, typically in the Bible, there are technically three words for hell in the Bible. Hades and Sheol kind of go hand in hand. It's just a Greek word and the Hebrew word for the same thing, and a word named Gehenna. So Hades and Sheol is simply the place of the dead. So if you're Jewish and you're talking about Sheol, you're not talking about a place of eternal torment, a place where the devil is doing nasty stuff. It's just a place when you die, you go to Sheol, or when you die, you go to Hades. And when you die, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to the same place. If you're Mother Teresa or Hitler, when you die, you go to Sheol. It's the place of the dead. It doesn't matter. There's no distinguishing. That is Hades and Sheol. Gehenna is an actual location. So it is right there. I have been to Gehenna. So I can literally say I've been to hell and back. Okay. So Gehenna are the dumps outside of Jerusalem. So little things about the dumps. So when you have dumps in the middle of a hot desert, sometimes they spontaneously combust. Also happens to be a particular type of stone in the area, brimstone, and it smells like sulfur when this rotten garbage is doing. So you got these flames and the sulfur and the brimstone in these dumps outside of Jerusalem. Criminals, when they were executed on the cross, were just tossed in Gehenna, like just that dead body. Which, by the way, Jesus was a criminal who died on the cross, and historically, maybe not theologically, but historically, he would have been taken off the cross and just dumped in Gehenna, because that's what you do with the bodies. If you were lepers, or anyone who was an outcast of society, you would have been living amongst the garbage dumps in Gehenna, partly for survival. People do it today in third world countries. You hear of these garbage people type, that they're going and scavenging for trash to just survive. Well, you're scavenging for trash. So I had a student actually describe it and say, like, their light bulb went on and goes, oh, by the way, when you read the Bible and Jesus is saying something about hell, most all the time he's using the word Gehenna. That's translated into English as hell. It's not at all hell. It's an actual place. So the student said, oh, so Jesus is kind of like saying the same thing like my dad says. Like, if you don't straighten up, you're going to end up on the streets. You're going to end up in the ghetto. You're going to end up, living a hard life, drugs and prostitution. That's where you're going to end up if you don't straighten up. Jesus listened to his lesson and listened to it in that context of particular lessons. If you don't really get your act together, you're probably going to end up in Gehenna. And it's like, oh, so it's just a lesson, So anyways, that's Hades, Sheol, and Gehenna. Also within Judaism, God is God. The buck stops here. If there's evil in the world, it's God. If there's good in the world, it's God. It's just God. That also helps. Obviously, ancient narrative and things are written in a much more barbaric way. But other than that, in the Old Testament, God becomes more of an evil character or a bad guy or angry at the very least. We kind of distinguish the Old Testament God and the New Testament God as being different types of gods. Well, it's all on his shoulders. There's no one to blame. But once we invent the idea of an evil one, then we can cast all the bad things onto the evil one, all the good things onto God, and all of a sudden God becomes much more of a good guy, where the Old Testament God becomes kind of one of those complex characters in the movies. He's supposed to be a good guy, but, what about all this bad stuff that's happening? We don't have a devil to blame it on. So the stories are written so whatever happens, whether it's mass genocide, war, or saving someone's life, the whole gamut is God, because God is God. There's no one to blame. That's Judaism, especially ancient Judaism. So we have stories like in the book of Job. One day the sons of Elohim, remember our earlier lessons, the sons of Elohim were standing in front of Yahweh Satan, the accuser, came along with him. The accuser's behind my head there. So Satan is just the Hebrew word for accuser. Okay? In fact, it's not Satan, it's the Satan, the accuser. So the way I've heard it best, I love the description, is he's the prosecuting attorney amongst the gods. That's his role. All gods have a role. He's the prosecuting attorney. And think of Job. I'm on Satan's side here. Think about it. He's up in heaven going, okay, that Job, you think he's all perfect and good and mighty and he just has this good, clean life. He's got white privilege. He has everything handed to him. You know, he's got a family with wealth, and he's got the right color skin, and he's got every opportunity in the world. Of course, he has a good life, and he's considered a good person. What if we took all of that away? Would it be as good? Any of you guys remember the Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd?
Yes.
That's what's going on here. I mean, I don't know if that's where they got the idea of the movie, but that's what's going on here. Is they took Dan Aykroyd, who was Job, the perfect person, framed him, set him up for drugs, and took away all of his money and cast him on the streets. And then they took Eddie Murphy off the streets and gave him all of the privileges to see what they would do. And Eddie Murphy became an upstanding citizen, and Dan Aykroyd went to a life of crime and was, an alcoholic, and, everything switched. That's what Satan's making a good point. And so he's accusing him. It's like, well, but then the Satan did all the stuff to him. No, Yahweh and the Satan were in on it together. They made a bet. They had $1. They said, okay, I bet you $1 we can ruin Job's life. And Yahweh's like, I don't think so. And by the way, Yahweh was wrong, okay, because Job did eventually blow up. We always talk about the patience of Job, but there's this whole long section where he blows up and is yelling at God. And it's like, that doesn't sound very patient to me. So anyways, he's just a prosecuting attorney. Psalms 109:6. I said, appeal the evil one to oppose him. Let Satan, Satan in our English thing, but let the Satan stand beside him. So there is an evil one, but it's not the Satan. Okay? The evil one is opposing him, and the prosecuting attorney is standing beside him. There are two distinctly different roles. And then behind my head, can I turn my camera? I don't think I can turn my camera off. But, oops, I already went ahead. But the second one, I flipped ahead. I can't flip back. But the second one was basically another verse showing Satan in the role of the Satan, a prosecuting attorney. Not a bad guy, not evil. He's just accusing. I think he's doing wrong things. He's just accusing someone. So now, remember the time I told you we have to keep coming back to the Babylonian exile? So in the Babylonian exile, they get taken into exile. They are exposed to different religions, different ways of thought, and then especially when they are freed by the Persians. The Persian Empire frees them from the Babylonian exile. And the Persians were much more supportive of the Jewish people as a ruler. They weren't mean and nasty like the Babylonians. The Persians helped finance and logistically rebuild the temple. They were very supportive and very kind in their empire over the Jewish people. So the Jewish people didn't see them as a threat. They kind of were influenced by them. These are good people. Well, the Persian Empire, their main religion was the religion of Zoroastrianism. There were others playing around there. But here's Zoroastrianism in a nutshell. There is a good God, and there is an evil one. And someday, a Savior will come and will defeat the evil one and bring peace on earth. I know what religion you're thinking of. It's not that religion. It's Zoroastrianism. About 500-600 years before Christianity comes along, the Babylonian exile. So that is Zoroastrianism. So now we have this dualism. So we have more of an evil one in play. So now we can see within the Jewish faith, they still don't have the dualism like we have in Christianity, a good God and a Satan battling it out for all eternity. But there is a little bit more of that influence of the Zoroastrian evil one going on. And then you also start seeing a more end times talk within Judaism that didn't exist there before. So that starts creeping in. Okay, who's this guy? Y'all get extra credit.
Yeah.
Satan? Wait. The student in the second row. You seem to disagree with everyone else. Who do you think this is?
I said Pan.
You said Pan. Peter Pan?
No, Pan the Greek god?
No, we got two scholars here. Pan, the Greek god. This is Pan, the Greek god. Okay? So, remember when we talked about Moses last week, and Moses was like a composite character of all these different people? And then we have this evolution of the Satan, and we're understanding him as being more of an evil one. And then we're starting to cast images that, I think the image of Pan seems pretty good for this guy, and there are reasons why we might view Pan in that way. Pan wasn't an evil one. He was more mischievous and really liked the ladies and things like that. But he wasn't the evil one, but his persona or his images gets reflected in ways in which we depict the Satan. And the New Testament, I wanted to read that one too, so I'm going to read it. I skipped over it. 1 Corinthians 4:1 is the last slide that I skipped over. Satan, this is 1 Corinthians, this is the New Testament. Okay, New Testament. Satan, who is the god of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. How many gods are in Christianity? Supposedly one. But the New Testament says that Satan is the god of this world. That comes from Gnosticism, Bible studies, several Bible studies ago. And within that Gnosticism, we have an understanding of a god of the spiritual world and a god of the material world, anything material, earthly, physical being bad, and anything spiritual being good. And so in the New Testament, we have this calling out two different gods. He's not just an evil one. And again, like the conversation on angels, well, what's the devil if the devil's not a god? Well, the devil is an eternal being who has powers over humans and nature. Well, what's a god? An eternal being that has powers over humans and nature. It's, so it's splitting hairs. Now, here's another name for Satan that you may have heard about: the devil, Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub. Anyone know where this name comes from?
Queen. Bohemian Rhapsody.
Beelzebub. Okay? So we start taking this God who we see as a threat, as a challenge, who we don't want to worship. And this actually, it's translated different ways. There's actually questions of how to exactly translate it. It could just be that Zebub is a location and it's the Lord of that location. It's also translated, you'll like this one, Lord of the Flies. Okay? So there's different ways to translate it. But this Beelzebub gets turned into this demonic Satan, devil type figure. That's not what's really its origin is, but that's where this origin, which is more of an innocent, this is who this God is, and it becomes more demonic in understanding, and that's where we get the Beelzebub. In Judaism, the serpent in the Garden of Eden was not the devil. Well, technically in Christianity, in the Bible, it's not the devil. The Bible never says it's a devil. It never says it's Satan. It never says it's evil in any way. It doesn't. It just says it's a serpent. That's all it says. We put all the other stuff on it. When I say we Christians, the Judaism does not put that on it. For Judaism, it's just the serpent. Later Christian writers, early on in Christianity, but it still was hundreds of years, a couple hundred years after Jesus, we start getting writers talking about this being the devil, but that's later people projecting the devil onto this. But in the thing, it just says a serpent came and tricked them. Well, in ancient myth telling, serpents were often a trigger in the story to let you know some mischief is going to happen. Again, not necessarily evil, but more mischievous. Something's going to happen. I think of, when I think of the serpent myself, I think of, for you Marvel fans, I think of Loki. Okay? Loki's not evil. He's mischievous. He may not make the best decisions in the world. He might be out for himself, but he's not evil. Okay? So when you see the serpent coming up in these ancient myth stories, you know that something's going to happen. I also kind of describe it as the horror movies. You know, when someone goes off into the woods themselves and that music starts playing, you know what's going to happen next. I mean, it's, if you want to close your eyes now, okay? Because you know what's going to happen next. So the serpent is cluing you in on something's going to happen. In this particular story, the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we've alluded to in this class but haven't totally talked about, in this particular scene, Gilgamesh had this magical plant that gave him immortality. But the serpent came along and stole his chance at immortality. Sound familiar? Magical plant that gives immortality, and a serpent coming along and stealing your immortality. By the way, this comes from Mesopotamia, the Babylonian region where they were held in exile for so long, and then wrote the story of the Garden of Eden, okay, which is located in the Mesopotamia region between the Tigris and Euphrates. So it all kind of connects together. And by the way, also about the Epic of Gilgamesh, we're going to be talking about Noah's Ark today in church. Almost word for word, Noah's Ark is in the Epic of Gilgamesh, written about 2,000 years before Genesis is written, ballpark. And even to the point of, and you'll hear in the worship service today, they send out a raven to find dry land. In the Bible, he sends out a raven to find dry land. And then a dove, but the raven gets sent out too. A lot of people don't know that, but it's that specific in the details that are exactly the same in the stories. So then we have Hades. Hades is someone who kind of rules over the place of the dead, but he again is not a bad guy, okay? He might be a downer. You probably don't want to bring him to your parties. He's going to, just bring everyone down. But he's not out to trick people on earth and to do horrible things to them or to bring evil into the world. All gods have a job, and he got assigned Hades, the place of the dead, and he's in charge of taking care of the area, making sure the lawn's cut and whatever. He's got to make sure everything's all taken care of down there. So that's Hades. But now you can see a little bit of Hades, a little bit of Pan, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little Zoroastrianism. Mix them all together, and you start developing an understanding of who we have of these influences over the years. With all of that said, let's go back to the story of the fallen angel. We're going to focus just on this line right here. When we read it before, it said, "O Lucifer, son of dawn." Okay? But now that's just in parentheses, and it's "O day star." The only translation of the Bible ever to say Lucifer is the King James Version. And the only verse that it ever says Lucifer is here. This is the only verse in the only location in only the King James Bible that says Lucifer. Every other Bible does not say Lucifer. Why? Because King James is the worst translation of any Bible ever in the history of humans, even though many Christians will say that this is the Word of God above all else. The King James Bible translated from the Latin Vulgate. The Latin Vulgate translated from the Greek Septuagint. The Greek Septuagint translated from the Old Testament Hebrew scripture. So the King James is a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. Also, it was ordered to be written by the king. And I don't know if you know this about kings. Sometimes they have an agenda. So there's a lot going on within the King James Version. So why, O day star, and not Lucifer? Morning star in the sky, Venus, and in Latin, the name for that star is Luciferum. That's the name for the star. And you use that star as an adoration towards someone that you admire and you want to lift up and praise. So, oh, Alan, day star, Luciferum, we love you. It's a great adoration to him. In the book of Revelation, Jesus is called the day star, Luciferum. In fact, do I have that here? Yeah, I do have that here. So he's called the bright morning star, the bright morning star, the bright morning star. And what's interesting is the King James Version didn't translate Jesus as being Lucifer. So they do know how the word's supposed to be translated. So wait a minute, you do know how that word's supposed to be translated. So Jesus isn't Lucifer, but if we have an agenda and we want to change a story to mean something else, then you maybe intentionally mistranslate it to a proper name of Lucifer rather than Luciferum. It'd be really fun to see Jesus as Lucifer, but they just did it as day star. Now, if this is not Lucifer, and Lucifer does not exist anywhere except for that one verse in that one translation of the Bible, then what is this whole chapter in Isaiah about, the long chapter that we read, if it's not about Lucifer falling down as a fallen angel? Well, let's go back to the thing. By the way, if you want to take things out of context, the best thing to do is don't read the verses you don't want people to hear, okay? So I did not read that line of verse 4 when we read it the first time around. You will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. Guess who this is about? It's about the king of Babylon. It happens to be specifically a taunt that they're going to take up against the king of Babylon. It's telling you what it's about. It's not about a fallen angel. It's about a taunt about King Babylon. So the Babylonian exile, I mentioned this might be an important time in history. So the Babylonian exile, they were there for an entire generation. Horrible king, Nebuchadnezzar, does horrible things all around. He's mean, tyrant, blah, blah, blah. Then the Persian Empire comes and destroys the Babylonian Empire, of course, kills the king. So the king is now dead. And now we're going to take up this taunt as we dance our way back to Israel. And we're going to say these words. Oh, how the oppressor has ceased. How the insolent has ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers. Scepter of rulers, not a demonic thing, but a kingly statement. Okay? That struck down people in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations with anger, with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses exalt over you. The cedars of Lebanon saying, since you were laid low, no one comes to cut us down. Sheol, the place of the dead, beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come because you've been killed. It rouses the shades to greet you, all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from the thrones all who were kings of the nations. All of them will speak and say to you, you have become as weak as we. You have become like us. So this mighty king is, we all die. You're just like any of us. You're human. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, and the sounds of your harps. Maggots are the bed beneath you, and the worms are your covering. That's a rotting corpse. That's not a demonic figure. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. You are cut down to the ground and laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will rise my throne above the stars of God. Yeah, that's pretty common for cocky kings, right? You know, that's, in fact, lots of kings and emperors saw themselves as a god, you know. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly, on the heights of Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the mountains. I will make myself the, whatever that word is, Moloch probably, or whatever. So this is clearly about an earthly king whose corpse is rotting because he's been sent down to the place of the dead because he's now dead, and it's telling you straight out it is how they get from here to the fallen angel is a huge stretch. You have to read the one mistranslated passage and the one mistranslation and do a whole lot of hat tricks in here along the way to massage it to make it to mean something else. A lot of our images from hell, a lot of our understanding, modern day understanding of hell, comes from Dante's Inferno, written as recently as the 1300s. So, you know, up until then, we did not have most of the imagery we have of hell. It came from this, and it wasn't really intended to be a theological work or to influence Christianity as much as it did, but it ended up doing it. And then the last slide here, we talked about this at small group a little bit last night because it came up in conversation. But the Jewish view of hell today is not an eternal torment where you're being tortured forever. It's an eternal washing machine, kind of more like a purgatory. But basically, we're all going to be with God, all of us. And so you might have to go somewhere to get clean enough to be with God, but we're all going to be with God. The worse you are, the longer you might be in the washing machine, okay? I always say, you know, Mother Teresa probably still has to go in for a rinse and a spin, but that's probably all she needed, a little rinse and spin, and she's out and she's up. But other people, in Judaism, Hitler will be in heaven, or not even a heaven because that's a Christian, but Hitler will be with God because everyone is with God. He might be in here for a couple of millenniums, but you know, however you want to play it. But the theological point is everyone will be with God, period. So that is the evolution quick overview. I think I did all that in 32 minutes here, it looks like. So a quick overview of the Satan, the devil. There's more to be told, but